So, manifest destiny really is something that we had drilled in our heads in middle school and in high school, as far as really looking at like what is it that America did that was the best thing for us, that expanded our borders, that it kind of made us who we are. And manifest destiny in itself really is a genocidal act, actually. And I know that sounds kind of harsh, but it's the truth. And what it did was really kind of pointed out what peoples, what tribes existed from one border, one ocean, I guess, to the next ocean, and really played into sort of how the country could expand and what was available for expansion. Because there was no real knowledge of the land beyond that. In fact, they sent out at the time Lewis and Clark. I'm sure you're familiar with Lewis and Clark, and they went from sea to shining sea, and they were supposed to document the people, the animals, the plants that existed from the land where the most western land that we knew in the United States. Further on, where was there another ocean? Was there more people? What was there? What was out there? So Lewis and Clark were sent out under the sort of guise that they would do this. They would document all this, the plants, the animals, and the people, and mountain ranges and forests and whatever it may be. What's between where we know and what we don't know? How far out can we go? Of course, we know now that's the West Coast. So, as they went through, they documented things. They took thousands upon thousands of samples of different specimens, animals, maybe fur, as well as plants and insects even. And they gathered these and they documented them with writing, and they collected them, they packaged them, they sent them back to D.C. And when their expedition was done, it took them a long, long time. It was a good part of their life, and they were very dedicated to it. When they had gotten back to D.C. to kind of report their findings and show their specimens, they had realized that everything they sent back was destroyed because it really wasn't the intent of why they were sent out, although they were sent out saying that was the intent, to collect these specimens, to document all this stuff. It was really to see what land was available for conquering. So it was kind of disappointing for them in that aspect. That's why you don't see in museums any of the specimens that they collected, or any of the things that they brought back. We just have the stories. We have their documentation, their writings, their journals, things like that. That's all we have. We don't have the stuff. But in Manifest Destiny in itself, it was really a way in which basically rich white men gave themselves permission because they felt that God gave them the right to use land in a way that was Christian and civilized. And that really stems from something called the Doctrine of Discovery. The Doctrine of Discovery was a papal bull put out in 1493. And a papal bull is sort of like a declaration by a pope. And this pope, in a long essay, in a long papal bull, basically said that if land isn't being used in a Christian way, from sea to shining sea, from land to island to ocean, if it's not being used in a Christian way, but being used by people in an uncivilized way, then God gives Christianity the right to take that land. And that papal bull has never been rescinded. And many countries all over the world, Christian and non-Christian nations, have used that declaration as a way in which they could acquire land. Because if God gives them the right, that's the ultimate right. Again, based on religion. So if you're not of that religion, then you would say, well, why did we do this all over the world? Well, because it was a reason. It was convenient. It was available. Now, during the time of Manifest Destiny, the president at that time, Abraham Lincoln, had never said those words. He's often associated with Manifest Destiny, but he's never said those words. That was actually words that were put in the newspaper by a reporter who you'll see in the slides. But yet he embraced it. Abraham Lincoln loved that idea. And Abraham Lincoln was not very friendly to Native Americans. He had a Indian Removal Act policy, I should say, that basically was put in place to remove Native people from their lands, kill them if necessary, and move on. He was the opposite of anything that we were taught in schools as far as Native people and his relationship to them goes. He also held the largest mass execution in this country by any government, and that was the execution of 32 Lakota warriors who were fighting against the U.S. cavalry at that time. Because after the Civil War, the Indian Wars were declared, so that was still during Abraham Lincoln's presidency. And he used a lot of the generals in the North and the South that fought in the Civil War to lead charges against the Indians, which became known as the Indian Wars, which were put in place at that point in time by Abraham Lincoln and his administration. So those who fought against the U.S. cavalry essentially fought against the country, even though the country didn't exist in that land at the time. The United States was going in under Manifest Destiny to conquer it. Lakota fought against. There were over 200 Lakota that were arrested for fighting against the U.S. cavalry. And of those, 32 had admitted in interviews that they wanted to kill American soldiers, cavalry soldiers, for attacking their villages, killing their women and children who were unarmed, and they were definitely going for blood. These tribes were, these Lakota. And Abraham Lincoln wanted to make a example of them. So he hung them, 32 at the same time. It's called the Lakota 32. And so what happens is that Manifest Destiny, being a Christian value enforced on a non-Christian world at that time, was really a sort of a way to eliminate a certain people. We do talk about an American Indian Removal Act, but two presidents had policies in which to eradicate Native Americans, wipe us out. They both would roll over in their graves if they knew we were still here. In fact, if they knew we were teaching at universities and being elected into federal government, state government sort of positions, because we were not expected to be here this day. We were expected to be annihilated by now. That's Andrew Jackson and Abraham Lincoln. We'll talk about Andrew Jackson a little bit later. But for Manifest Destiny, we're going to be focusing on Abraham Lincoln.